okay, well, here's an opportunity, but it's not allowed. Or, like, here's demand, but there's no, yet to even like have one. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to like, then go to the communities and be like, all right, here are some opportunities, but, you know, you could either allow them or you could market them or what have you.
That's why I'm all for them and pretty much anywhere. Because if someone wants to undertake doing a daycare, by all means.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a saint. You're a saint. Okay, cool. Sounds good. What about, well, Mindy was there. I imagine she'll be in a minute. We pass that around right there. Thank you.
Did any of you guys go to farmer's market?
I did.
I did too. Yeah,
Picked up some pierogies.
so did I.
Cheese.
Yeah. I picked up something from every vendor. I'm like, first time I'm gonna hit it.
Kick it off.
It was yummy. Everything we got was fabulous.
Sam said it was pretty crowded, and then
Yeah.
it rained and people left.
I came during the rain, but there were still people there.
Nice. Word got out. Good.
Yeah, it was a good hit.
They allow food trucks, right?
They had a food truck there. Yep.
My neighbor has one, and I've been trying to get him to come here because he's got really good food.
Yeah.
So
I think Sam might be looking for more even if he's got a few vendor spots open still. Parking was fine. I mean, this front lot was probably 60% full.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to try.
We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to East Bay Charter Township's Planning Commission. We'll kick off the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And can we please have a roll call?
Ferguson.
Here.
Richardson.
here.
Wassam.
Present.
Walters.
Present.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Leonard.
Here.
And it's noted that Renee will be in a couple minutes.
Yes, thank you. Next up is just a review for conflict of interest. Is there anyone that has anything in conflict with this evening's agenda? If not, we'll move on to the agenda itself. Any changes, alterations, or are we good to go as is?
I'll move to approve the agenda for May 7th, 2024.
Support.
Thank you. Motion by Paul, seconded by Mindy for approval of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the approval of meeting minutes from April 16th, 2024. Special meeting. Any alterations or?
The adjournment, wasn't that at 9:30 and not 10:30?
Well, it got late,
I know.
but I think it was 9:30.
Called it at 9:30.
Yeah.
It says 9:25.
9:25.
Do I have a,
Oh, that's from 2022. I included the minutes for the next agenda.
oh, okay.
Okay. Okay.
I remember that.
There we go. Got it.
So I move to approve the meeting minutes from the Special Planning Commission meeting on April 16th, 2024.
Support.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Rhonda, supported by Mindy for approval of the meeting minutes for April 16th, 2024. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Next up is public comment, and just to lay the ground rules, we're up for about a 3-minute window for anybody that'd like to approach the podium. We have received a couple hundred different pieces of correspondence, so just know that all the planning commissioners have gotten those in their packets. But feel free to come to the lectern, and Claire, you wanted to introduce them.
And just wanted to make one clarification. We'll have a public hearing there will be an opportunity for public comment on the Tamarack item.
Yes,
Later
thank you
on
for
in the meeting.
clarification. So we will visit the Tamarack exclusively here once the public hearing kicks off. But anything that's on the top of anyone's mind, feel free to step on up.
This is outside of Tamarack, right? You're at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I like where we're going here, people. Okay. We'll move right along to correspondence. Claire, outside of all the correspondence we received, we've got a few new things on our deck.
Yep, I think there's one item in your packet, just general correspondence. Blair Township is preparing to begin their master plan update. And then you'll see on your desk, also emailed to you, were all correspondence related to the Tamarack Lodge proposed expansion that came in after the packet went out last Tuesday.
Thank you. Any questions of Claire? Okay, moving on to reports. Mindy, you're up.
So we had an update last month from the sheriff's office with regards to the cameras that we have that are looking at cars that are coming into our township. And about a year ago, we approved the purchase of these cameras. They're called flat cameras, and they've had a hard time putting all of them up due to MDOT regulations and this, that, and the other thing. But one of the stories that they told, because, you know, everybody thinks of these cameras as they're going to get us for speeding and they're going to get us for this and that. No, they're looking for, they're just looking at your plate. They're not looking at your speeds. They're not looking at, you know, that kind of thing. But one thing that it did, which really hit home, and I went back home and I went to work and I told this story, and I wanted to share with you guys too, is that our sheriff's department got a call from the U.S. Marshals in California. And they had a trafficking group out of California that they'd been investigating, and they hit on our flat cameras. So the U.S. Marshals flew from California. They were tracking this vehicle on the flat cameras, and they tracked it for 3 days. They figured out what this person's route was and what they were doing, and the U.S. Marshals arrested them from our flat cameras and took them back to California. And I don't know about you, but I just got goosebumps there. I have kids. But you know, people are opposed to these because they think that, you know, Big Brother's coming to get you. But I really think that that proved to me how valuable these were in our township. So that's the biggest takeaway that I had from them, so.
Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
that's awesome.
It's interesting.
Nice.
Did we ask a question at this point, or is not allowed?
No.
Okay,
No,
sorry.
no, but thank you for asking. Thank you, Mindy, that's awesome. Paul, how are you going to follow that up?
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't top that. I can't top that. Anyway, we did have a meeting on April 9th. We had a request for a dimensional variance, which was turned down. They were looking for about a 14-foot front dimensional variance, and it just didn't fit, so it was rejected.
Thank you. Last but not least, Claire, Planning and Zoning.
The only update I have is just a reminder that the East Bay Beach District Design Charrette is next week, so it's going to be all week. There's a flyer on your desk. We also sent out a press release. We'll be sending out email details to everyone this week, but there's going to be meetings throughout the week, stakeholder meetings, broad range of topics, from coastal resiliency to transportation, mobility. We're going to be meeting with residents along the corridor, employees, business owners, as well as we've got the 2 public meetings. So hope you can participate and join that process. We closed the survey last week. I think there was 440 respondents.
Wow, that's good. Thank you. Any questions for Claire? Yes.
If you were to have planning commissioners at only one meeting, what meeting would you want them at?
It's a great question. I think both open houses would be great to have planning commission participation. The first open house, it's going to be opportunity for input. The design team will be there and will be putting together renderings based on the feedback for the public to review at the second one. So it's going to be kind of a cool feedback loop where you'll see your input reflected in the second public open house.
Thank you.
Okay, if no other questions, we'll move right into new business before the planning commission under number 9A. This is site plan review 9-22 TC Hyatt House. This is a site plan extension request. And Claire, do you want to set the table for us, please?
Sure, and I think I got a call from the applicant today who is not available to attend the meeting, so it'll be just me answering questions. Hopefully I can answer the questions. But as you'll recall, Hyatt House was approved June 7th, 2022. That was the meeting that went until 10:30, so the minutes are in your packet. The proposed hotel to 5-story extended stay hotel on a almost 4.5 acre parcel. The site is located on the south side of US 31 with the Hampton Inn to the west and the State Park to the east. As you'll see in the conditions tracker, which is basically what we're using to track where the applicant is in the process, the applicant has permits and approvals from Metro Fire. They have a stormwater permit. They have their Eagle Water permit. Some of the items still pending include the MDNR stormwater easement approval, the MDOT driveway permits, and a performance guarantee for landscaping and soil erosion permit. Sounds like, based on correspondence with the applicant, the construction's been delayed due to increased costs of financing, labor and material availability, and other factors outside of the control of the applicant. They're looking for a 1-year extension to allow them time to secure a land use permit, and they are looking to move forward with the project. So you'll see that included in the memo or the cover page on page 6, there's 4 conditions that should be evaluated by the Planning Commission before granting an extension. So the first one, the conditions necessitating the delay are reasonably beyond the control of the applicant. The requirements and standards are reasonably related to the development and have not changed. I can tell you that those zoning requirements have not changed since then. The development in the proximity to the approved site plan has not resulted in changed conditions impacting the site, and there has not been a change in state or federal law or local ordinance.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the commission for kind of discussion or questions. Mindy, go ahead. Kick us off.
There was talk that they were going to transfer this property to the land bank to get TIF for potential for a new pedestrian bridge. Did that ever happen?
So they did transfer the property to the land bank, and then they haven't moved forward with the brownfield plan, to my knowledge. So they have not been in front of the brownfield authority. They have not moved forward with those conversations, but they still have the opportunity because they did land bank the property.
Do you know if that's off the table then, or is it just stalled?
I think it's stalled.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think part of it is dependent on them getting like an anchor restaurant and some of the financing that they're looking at.
Yes, Paul.
Given the fact that we're changing the zoning and the requirements, this still, as currently presented, falls within the new zoning regulations?
As presented, if we approve this extension, they would still have they would still be able to build their hotel development as approved by the Planning Commission
Oh.
under the existing zoning ordinance.
Okay, even though...
If it expired, they would need to come under the new zoning
okay.
ordinance. So by extending this site plan, they would be approved per our current ordinance.
Okay, fine, because they haven't... yeah.
Any changes?
Well, I just want to add to that, because we don't know exactly when the new zoning ordinance will be approved.
True.
So maybe we'll cross that bridge a little bit later. Just leave it at that.
There's no problem, what could go
Yeah.
wrong?
Yeah. 'Cause we don't know exactly when it's gonna be in effect, but, so right now, let's just treat it as under current zoning. Okay.
Mindy?
What about the setback for the creek? Because we changed that since this was approved.
This was approved with a 50-foot setback from the creek,
Okay.
which is still what's in effect.
Okay.
And this feels kind of normal. We've seen this a few times in the last, several months. Kind of the same story, right? Access to labor, rising construction costs, access to interest rates. So, to me, it doesn't sound like anything's really been altered necessarily by them, per se, that would impact my feeling against it, but the pleasure of the commission.
I'll make a motion to approve the one-year extension for the TC Hyatt House site plan approval to expire on June 7th, 2025, based on the conditions of fact reviewed. Do I have to go through them, or can we just, okay. Adopted by reference.
Support.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mindy, seconded by Renee for approval of a one-year extension for SPR 9-22. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is site plan review 6-24 Tamarack expansion. This is a public hearing, and we'll have discussion and possible action. Before we open the public hearing, I just want Claire to kind of set the table for this one, and then we'll open it up.
Sure. We also have Peter, legal counsel, here, as well as the applicant. So this is the Tamarack proposed expansion. There's, as you likely noticed in your packet, there's 5 parcels that they're looking at and looking to come under one cohesive plan for the complex, hoping to tie together the existing Tamarack as well as 2 new proposed hotels and the conference center. The original Tamarack was approved in 2004. It was more multi-phased, but only a portion of it was built. It was constructed in 2005. There's currently 29 units. At that time, the Planning Commission and Township required 1 parking space per unit. Looking at some of the environmental considerations, and we did send this on to the Watershed Center. They didn't have any comments or concerns on it, but the National Wetlands Inventory does identify 1 wetland near the mouth of the creek. The applicant is not proposing any disturbance to the wetland area. There's a stream that runs along the west boundary of the east boundary of the site. It's passing under 2 existing bridges, 1 pedestrian and 1 vehicular, which are not proposed to be modified. The adopted 2023 FEMA flood maps from April of 2023. A large amount of this is within the floodplain, but the applicant is proposing to raise the elevation up above the floodplain elevation, which is permitted. I will note that the proposed building and parking configuration has a little over 5,000 square feet less impervious surface than the previously approved plans included. I will note that there is a discrepancy between how the application was reviewed and what's actually being proposed by the applicant in terms of parking. So, and as I detailed in the staff report, I was under the impression that parking being provided for the proposed hotel complex was in addition to the 47 spaces that the township had set aside for the conference center. In actuality, the applicant is not proposing to provide any dedicated parking spaces for the conference center, so they're looking to share all of the parking spaces. So I just did want to make that clarification. All parking would be shared between the 2 uses, and the applicant is here to provide more information on that. The As you are likely aware, the zoning ordinance does allow for some flexibility for the planning commission to approve a site plan with parking reductions based on shared parking with an adjacent site, dual function of parking spaces, based on information provided by the applicant. But I did want to highlight that when I drafted the staff report, I was under the impression that they were keeping those 47 spaces dedicated to the conference center. But in actuality, all the parking provided is kind of holistically for the entire site. So there's, happy in a future time to go through some of the conditions, some of the items that I was looking for more information on, and some of the, but probably more appropriate to do that later in the discussion.
Yeah, and before the applicant comes up, because we'll call on you next, get ready. Mindy, you had a quick question.
So it says existing Tamarack, 29 spaces required, and it is my understanding that there's lockouts there where those are different sleeping units and can be rented separately. Those are not included in the parking calculations, correct?
That's correct. When Tamarack was approved, they were approved for one parking space per unit.
And a unit did not include the
Correct.
lockout.
Yep.
Were they proposed as lockouts at that time?
There was no discussion from what I read in the staff report about lockouts, so.
And have we, it is my understanding that lockouts, the way that I understand lockouts, they can be totally different families. They don't have to be anything associated with the person in the, I'll call it the main unit versus the lockout. They can be rented to somebody that comes up from the street and just be rented. So it's a totally different,
That's my understanding, but I would defer to the applicant for
Okay.
clarification on that.
It's not on that issue, I'm just thinking, Mr. Chairman, as a matter of protocol, you have quite a few people here, you'll likely have some extensive public comment during the hearing. It may be better to have that done first, and that way the applicant can also address some of the comments, which may result in additional questions by planning commission members as well.
I like that format. That can work fine. We can do that. Hang tight. We'll come back. That being said, we'll then open up the public hearing at 6:55. And for anyone that would like to come up and address the current project before us, feel free to have at the lectern. Again, we're looking at hopefully 3 minutes to each one of your comments.
Joe Barry, resident of Tamarack 6 weeks out of the year, my home away from home, and one of my favorite places in the whole world. I am just going to jump on what these fine two young ladies just said. There's a major, math is simple, and if you look at the parking lots from east to west, there's 47, 19, 16, and 72, which equals 198. There's 17, and I hate to be this direct, but there are 17 phantom spots that actually aren't there because we get bike credits, but we can't park in them. So that's 215 spots on the plan. The Tamarack, as was just stated, has 43 lockoffs. Those are keys. Those are individual rooms. So even if we argued it's a hotel and not a condominium with 3-bedroom units, there are 43 keys. So if you take those 43 rooms, add them to 160, you're already over 200 beds, or not more beds, 200 rooms. We're not even talking about staff. We're not talking about the hotel. I mean, we have 8 employees at peak hours. We know that's not true. You can't run a 200-operation resort with 8 people. It doesn't work. I just interviewed housekeeping at a neighboring hotel, 150 beds. At peak hours, their housekeeping staff is 14 to 15 people. That's not counting bartenders, that's not counting maintenance, that's not counting people that check in. The number to run a resort with 200 beds is probably closer to 30 people. We're counting 8. So all that being said, if you do the math and you throw in the hall, which was it clearly states that the hall and the hotel have different peak hours. Anybody that's driven, that knows anything about hospitality knows that your prime time for a wedding is Friday, Saturday night. The busiest time in the resort is Friday, Saturday night. you're going to, I'll oversimplify it. On Saturday night in midsummer, when the hotel's sold out and there's 200 people there, and there's a wedding next door, and you can't park at the hall because the 80 people in the hotel next door are already parked in the hall, so there's no place for people to park. You got 250 to 300 cars to park, and you have 200 spots. What's Plan B? Call the riot police? Because that's where it's going. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Hines. My wife and I reside at 130 Vineyard Ridge, Traverse City, and we have owned a 3-bedroom, 1/8 fractional since 2011. I've been a real estate developer downstate since the early 80s. I have developed and built, owned, and managed hundreds of hotel rooms, hundreds of multifamily residential units, and a couple 100,000 square foot of retail and office space. Several of our developments have been of the mixed-use nature, so I'm quite familiar with that program. In every case, we always made sure there was enough on-site parking for every building and use. Without doing so, we knew we would have disgruntled guests and tenants. Also, we knew there was always a chance of a future sale and wanted every building or asset to stand on its own and still be conforming. Even though we still own many of our properties from the 80s and 90s, we have sold several properties over the years for various reasons, and that could likely happen here also. Though the applicant has purchased the parcels from R.C. Herman, they will never fully own the Tamarack Lodge, as there are approximately 200 title holders of that property. The full development will never be under a single ownership entity unless they join their parcels with the Tamarack Lodge Association, which was R.C. Herman's plan in the beginning. Absent that, I believe there is no amount of paperwork that can protect the Tamarack Lodge fractional owners without having their own on-site dedicated parking to meet their needs. This site was never intended to have this many units, nor have off-site parking. Off-site parking will create unsafe situations for guests and employees. The applicant does not own or control the route to the Tamarack Lodge, nor can they guarantee safe passage. Trying to cross the speedway, which they do not own, cannot control salting, plowing, and shoveling, nor the highway. That's a recipe for disaster. They cannot control those parcels to keep it safe. Workers' comp and liability claims and lawsuits are bound to happen, and heaven forbid any fatalities crossing that highway. It would absolutely potentially impact insurance procurement going forward. This development is not in downtown Traverse City or a large city where there are adjacent parking garages. Off-site parking in this case will be an owner and management nightmare. Most likely, the applicant will find that paying guests will not come back for a second visit, and with social media, guest satisfaction scores, many people won't even come for the first time. So I'm not sure why they're going down that road, quite honestly. If the applicant wants to chase the maximum number of units, they should look at putting a hotel building and parking behind the speedway, and those guests can decide to traverse over the highway as they see fit, freely choosing to do so. Their desire to maximize the number of units should not come at the expense or detriment of the existing Tamarack owners. This application with off-site parking as a component should be denied. I will be available for any questions or clarifications. As a footnote, I've stayed there many times. I've got a 3-bedroom, quite often have 2 other couples joining, even could have a 4th. That current parking situation is full on any sold-out night, along with people that have brought up boats and trailers are storing it on one of the future sites or behind the speedway. So I don't think anything's taken into consideration of that. And I also agree that if the applicant is going to use current guidelines of 1 unit per bedroom, the Tamarack Lodge has 54 bedrooms. full baths, everything. Equivalent of that would dictate at least 54 spots, plus employees and such. So, thank you for your time. Go green.
Go Wyatt.
My name's Rick Kraszewski. I'm an owner at Tamarack. I've been doing it for a long time. My sister was one of the original owners. I just want to make sure everyone at the township here understands how we use Tamarack, at least my family, in this parking situation. I'm in favor of the development. We need a swimming pool there. We need all other features within there to make it a better environment for everyone guests there. But I have a family of 4 kids plus my wife, and like the previous gentleman said, as my kids aged and we showed up at Tamarack, we would have 4 to 5 cars for our family alone, and that is 1 unit in the middle of July. Because my kids are in Ann Arbor, some are in Kalamazoo, one's from Chicago, and they all meet as a family reunion middle of July at Tamarack. And it's very common, like this gentleman said, rarely, though, I don't know if you've ever been in one of those units. The main units that are 2-bedroom, you got a master bedroom suite, full living room, full dining room, full kitchen, and this lock-off that you were talking about is another large room with a kitchenette. They're large, guys, so you can cram 8 people without even trying into a 2-bedroom unit. So if you're using a ratio of 1 parking spot per room, bad math, that's all I'm gonna say, right off the get-go. So if you can add up the units, I would minimally be in the 2+ parking spot per the current units right now, and then whatever the gentlemen from Warfield are planning to do, if they're more hotel room style, I call it Holiday Inn style, where you just have 2 queen beds or a king in 1 room, then your ratio of 1 parking spot per room is probably more accurate, like you're accustomed to doing when you arrive at a hotel room. Okay, so I just want to make sure you're aware how the summer months go at Tamarack. Those rooms
Could you guys stop the side conversations, please?
Yeah, we're having a hard time
That's
hearing.
it. We're recording this.
So I just want to make sure you're aware of how Tamarack is used. It's a, especially in the summer, it is such a family-centric place. Even our neighbors from Ohio, 4 kids, they probably had 6 cars show up because their kids were from all over the United States showing up for their family reunions in the middle of July. That's topic 1, so I hope you know, on the parking. I want the development to go. I don't want to stop the development, just got to address the parking. One suggestion, the event center, knock it down. Build a parking structure and put an event center on top of it. Okay? Gain 2, 3 floors of parking and then put the event center up high. Okay, you could, I don't know who the developers are, but maybe you can do something like that. And then no one's crossing the street, it's all on the same side of the property and go from there. My other concern, completely different topic, I read the proposals, they're talking about having a bar, swimming pool and stuff like that. I want some of that stuff to be at Tamarack. And if this gets approved, and now the developer goes halfway through and says, oh, I'm out of money, no pool, no bar, how does the township guarantee that the developer is actually going to put the features in that they're proposing? I don't know how that happens. Because they could get, 2 months into it and go, no, we're short on our funding, and where do we get all these features that they're promising, yet we could be hit with a harder parking situation? So I'm asking the township, not force, but address the developers to say, please put in what you're saying you're going to do and hold to that. That's my sense.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Jim Maka, and I am also a owner for 6 weeks at the Tamarack. We consider that our second home. As many other people behind me has already stated, the reviewing the expansion plan, it states that peak hours are only going to be 8 employees to manage, run, and operate the resort with the 200 rooms and the outside bar and the hall, actually, next door. This number is grossly understated. It doesn't, like Mr. Berry's mentioned before, he interviewed someone at another hotel with 150-some rooms, and they had way more people to manage and clean the rooms than what this proposal is requiring. Also, another gentleman mentioned about the parking. At the end of 4 Mile, we all know there's a public boat launch. And I've witnessed through the summer that some people from the public come and launch their boats, and there's only 5 or maybe 5 spots to park your car or trailer. Well, those are usually filled, and they use the Tamarack a lot to park their trailer as well while they're out enjoying the lake. So that is going to consume parking spots as well. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. Also, with the short notice that we received regarding this expansion, there hasn't been enough time for us as co-owners to review all of the issues surrounding this development. Again, we're not against the development of this property, the Warforce are suggesting. It just needs to be scaled back, in our opinion, so the parking does not become an issue. With this expansion, it seems like you're going to play parking roulette. You're going to go for dinner, and hopefully you'll have a spot when you come back. And they're talking the summer months, July and August. So I ask you, please postpone this expansion for further review, and I appreciate the time that you allowed me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susan Meinberg. I'm a lawyer from Detroit. I drove up here today because I'm so angry about this expansion. I own 2 units at Tamarack, a 2-bedroom unit on the top floor and a 3-bedroom unit on the 4th floor, which has a lock-off unit. I've been coming up to Traverse City with my family for 35 years. For 32 years, we stayed at the beach condominiums. And I have witnessed, even as an owner, that every summer, that current Tamarack lot fills up. People bring up their lake toys, their trailers, they have multiple guests. And I come up with my grandkids and my elderly parents. I can't imagine having to park across the highway behind the gas station. If it's pouring rain, if we come back from dinner at midnight, really I have to walk across that. It's not a residential street, it's a highway. It's totally unsafe. At 72 spots, then put your hotel guests in that lot. See if they look that. It's totally unsafe. I am not happy. As an owner, I want a reserved spot adjacent to my Tamarack building. And I don't want to have to go to dinner or go out and then come back and find out there's no place to put my car. And plus, as the other speakers have suggested, we have additional guests. So I guess they're going to have to park across the street. But this is totally unsafe. In the newsletter that Tamarack just sent, they said that you're considering reducing the parking requirements to half a space for a unit. That I don't understand at all. How is that going to work? So I urge you not to adopt that revision. I mean, what's next? Are we going to have to park downtown and take a shuttle bus? This is just not feasible. And aside from the parking issue, I can't imagine adding 160 guests to the beach. I guess I'm going to have to stop using the beach and just enjoy my balcony. So I hope that you critically review this expansion project and put the brakes on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
There really isn't a whole lot more to say. I think everybody has said it. I too am an owner at Tamarack. We've been there now 10 years. We love it. I can tell you that as we have done other like VBROs, and I can tell you that Tamarack has always been in top-notch shape. It's never beat up. It's something to be proud of. And now, like the others say, I'm going to have to park potentially behind a gas station in order to go there. Today would have been a great day to have to go to my car tonight to come here. We'd either have to walk, or my husband would have had to gone over there to pick me and come back and pick me up. And again, we got to juggle and jockey for a parking spot. During the summer months, when that place, it is packed, and sometimes you can't even find a parking spot now, let alone if they put up these 2 hotels. And I have to tell you, while some of these people are excited about the 2 hotels, I am not. The reason I like Tamarack is because it's quiet. We live downstate in Livonia, and we come up here for peace, for quiet, to relax. Not for a bunch of people running around back and forth. It was private, and that was the draw here. And the other thing I want to say is, I can't imagine that the value, which I get it, we only own a fractional share, but it's still ours, and that this is not going to add value to our investment. It can only devalue our investment. And I'm not so sure that if that's what the community up here and Traverse City and the Planning Commission, if it's about, you don't care about the people that own anything, only about up-and-coming new facilities, then I'm really disappointed then in even being up here. That's really all I have to say. It's the parking. And also, I just want to remind some of the folks that are owners of Tamarack, we do have bylaws. The association does have bylaws, and there are restrictions in the bylaws that talk about nuisance and only people that, and the common elements, who's eligible for those common elements, not people coming from other facilities. So that too has to be taken into consideration as well. Somebody's going to have to change these. Thank you.
Could I have your name for the record?
Nancy Philpott, Philpott.
My name is Chris Maka, and I'm also a co-owner of 6 Weeks at the Tamarack. My concern is with the safety. Even if the owners are given parking spots, what about the people in the hotels? If you've got a family with kids or have grandparents and you're crossing that 4-mile and US 31 street, even though it's been stated that there's a crosswalk and there's a traffic light, I don't want to start crying. There was a young boy killed there in 2007, and traffic has only gotten worse than back at that time. I fear for the safety for my future grandkids. I'm sorry. My family's all criers.
It's okay, it's a safe space.
And also, we've crossed that street going to some restaurants across the way. People that are driving from 4 Mile, making a right-hand turn onto US 31, do not always yield to us. We have to stop. If you've got a family, I was one of 8 children, and my parents would have never been able to hold hands with all of us crossing a road. There are families there that have more than 2 children. So I just think that should be taken into consideration. This is a foreseeable disaster at that corner. I just ask that you take into consideration to postpone this and really look at the plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Jan Black. My daughter Carolyn owns one of the units there. I really have more just some questions that maybe you can answer at some point in time. But looking at the site plan, the main parking lot runs parallel to the highway, and the property line between the undeveloped parcel to the west and the developed Tamarack Lodge pretty much cuts that in half. So it looks like there's about 38 or 40 parking spots to the west, and about maybe 26 or so to the east in front of Tamarack Lodge. My question is if a new owner or if the Whirlpools decided to separate these parcels, could that parking lot be split into 2 separate units and basically a barrier put up so that you couldn't drive through from the east to the west? My understanding is that, like, the fire department usually likes to be able to pull in and pull out with any big development, so they probably wouldn't let that. But even if you did that with setbacks, you'd probably lose a few more parking spaces. So that's really a question, what could happen with that? Then someone did mention about the pool being developed, and if for whatever reasons with costs and stuff, the pool doesn't get developed. Is there some mechanism such as occupancy permit not being granted until those amenities like the pool and the bar and stuff like that are completed or not? So, these are just questions. With any development, obviously, there's pros and cons, and clearly to develop it, you have the security knowing that it's finally developed, and that's some comfort in that, instead of having empty lots, it could be turned into a strip joint or a marijuana joint, who knows what goes on nowadays, So, I mean, there's obviously developments, positive benefits, but there's also the uncertainty that would be nullified if this thing was developed, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, I know I spoke, but I just want to add to this gentleman, so you guys are aware, because if you never use Tamarack, he was...
You need to get to the mic, please.
He was describing how the parking lot is used, and I'll turn to all the owners right now. Most of us use the parking lot, go west to where the boat launch is, and come out at the light at 4 Mile, so you can make a right or left. It's almost impossible to go out the front entrance of Tamarack and try to make a right or left. There is too much traffic in the summertime. So if someone's going to block the parking lot, you're going to cause a whole nother problem right in front of Tamarack of people trying to turn left or right. So you've got to allow people to get to the 4 Mile boat launch light to get in and out. And again, I mentioned our family, whoever was saying before, you know, behind that speedway is the Tart Trail. And we used to bring 6 bikes with us. Everyone had to cross the street to go to the Tart Trail and ride their bikes into town. You got to make that a really safe intersection if you're going to allow this to flow this way. Thank you.
So I just want to make sure there is anybody else that wants to speak before we double down.
We're going triple.
Thank you, Joe. Extremely important.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak, by the way? Okay, how about it?
Thank you. No, very important. Just so you know, there is a condo association that paid just under, let me give you the exact number, $949,000 last year as an aggregate. Now, the Warfuls have roughly 40% of that, so we'll just call it $500,000. So we've paid $500,000 in HOA fees together to maintain the lobby, the parking lot, and we thought parking spots. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Can I double down one other thing?
Yes.
Just before they come up, I want to mention a couple of our hotels. One is a full service with banquet and convention center in there, and another hotel was a Marriott property with a standalone banquet and convention center. And so I'm intimately familiar with the timing of weddings, filling the banquet areas, that at the same time, rooms are fully occupied, and there can be mutually exclusive. Sometimes they may have a synergy, but quite often there isn't. So any of this reduction, mixed use in this situation with those two hospitality doesn't fly. If it was office space that are empty at night, it could. But, so, from experience, not going to fly.
Thank you. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 7:16. And at this point, I think we've got a few different items to go through, but I want to ask any representative of the applicant that would like to come up. Now would be a good time to kind of introduce the project and maybe chip away at some of these comments that you've just heard.
Certainly. Thank you. Dusty Christensen with Mansfield Land Use Consultants, here tonight on behalf of Warful Enterprises, the applicant. You've all seen the packet and the drawings in your packet and are aware that the proposed project seeks to combine 5 existing parcels that are just about 5.5 acres total, 4.75 on the north side of US 31, and then about another 3/4 of an acre on 4 Mile Road, as previously referenced behind the Speedway gas station. All of those parcels are zoned regional business, and the proposed uses are allowed by right within that zoning district. Claire did a great job of kind of summarizing the existing approvals from the original Tamarack submittal back in '04. That project was approved with 4 condo buildings, 75 total units along these 4 parcels here on the north side of US 31. I'll note, just for the later discussion of parking, because I'm sure it's going to come up again, I'll touch on it and we'll probably talk about it later. Those original plans had 81 total spaces north of US 31. Okay, and so we have 60, 79, 147, so somewhere in the ballpark of 136 on the north side of US 31. So we have more parking provided on the north side of US 31 than the originally approved plans. As Claire mentioned in her overview before we got started, the proposed uses on the site are 2 80-room hotel buildings to the west and east of the existing lodge building, and then maintaining the existing meeting and conference space, Harbor Brook Hall on the eastern portion of the site. The off-referenced parking lot off of 4 Mile is down here, and you can see that there's an existing sidewalk that connects that to the intersection and then across US 31 to the hotel site. We're proposing an extension of that sidewalk across that entire piece of property to facilitate pedestrian traffic to and from the parking lot itself. The existing parking lot is in this lighter shaded gray here. So the existing driveway off US 31 to the site is the boulevard entrance here, and the drive lane for the parking lot extends out to 4 Mile Road. And the proposed portion of parking is in front of the proposed east building here with 19 additional spaces in front of that building. The referenced bar and pavilion are located here, adjacent to the west hotel building. That structure is about 500 square feet as far as seating area is concerned. It complies with the lake setback, and again, we have a sidewalk here that extends along the east side, or excuse me, the north side of the east building, ties into an existing sidewalk system that runs along the waterfront portion of the existing building. And initially, we had it proposed to continue all the way across the property, but have removed that portion of the sidewalk because it falls within the water setback. Just as a heads up, we may be heading to the ZBA to request an extension of that walk within the setback on the east side as a permeable material, but that'll follow. As of right now, it's off of the plans. The site is served by municipal sewer and water. We have plans that have been reviewed by MDOT, Eagle, Grand Traverse Metro Fire, and all of those agencies have responded with positive comments saying that they don't have any issues with the plans as presented. Additionally, there was a traffic assessment done by Progressive A&E, a traffic engineer out of Grand Rapids, and that report was in your packet as well. The number of potential trips generated is less than the threshold to require a full traffic study in the ordinance, and they didn't identify any issues in their report. As was mentioned previously, we have no additional proposed curb cuts, so the 3 across the US 31 frontage, one at Harbor Brook Hall, one at the main lodge, and then the driveway access on 4 Mile will remain. And we have a total of 215 spaces provided across the board for parking, both on the north side of the property adjacent to the hotel uses in the existing lodge and the conference center, and then an additional 72 down on the 4 Mile lot. I'll note that the plans as presented comply with the township ordinance parking standards, which requires 204 spaces by definition in the ordinance. And I'll just read that definition for motel, hotel, and tourist home. In Article 7, in the parking article, for motels, hotels, and tourist homes, you are required to provide 1 parking space for each sleeping unit plus 1 for each employee during the largest shift, plus restaurant requirements if applicable. It doesn't note meeting space as part of that parking requirement. And I'll also note that the township has approved multiple hotels in the regional business zoning district in recent years with meeting space included and did not require additional parking for that meeting space. So this proposal is at least reflective of those other proposals in that it has meeting space, which will be combined in an overall campus without additional parking for the meeting space itself. And on that note, I discussed this with the applicants prior to the site walk that we had earlier this evening. They are going to be providing or selling blocks of rooms with summertime events. So when there is a wedding on a Saturday night, part of the deal for getting the event space is you have a block of rooms at the hotel for the guests of the event. So the folks who are coming to the event will be showing up and parking, staying at the hotel, and then walking from the hotel to the wedding at the event center. Any community events or events that won't require room blocks, those will be in the shoulder seasons and over the winter when the hotel won't be at full capacity. We see that as a way to alleviate some of this parking issue. And I'll just reference that we feel that we've complied with the ordinance standards for parking, and I see the rest of it as a management issue. And if there are questions on that, I can defer to the owners who are here. With that, I'll note that the buildings themselves, for the sake of going over it, are 145 feet wide and 67 feet deep. I think I said 62 feet when we were on site during the site walk. I was wrong. They're 67 feet deep. Each of those buildings is about 9,700 square feet in footprint. And as it was mentioned in the intro, the overall impervious surface calculations for the entire project when compared to the originally approved Tamarack Lodge project are less. We're about 5,400 square feet less in impervious surface. With that, I'll note that we're doing our best and have done our best to comply with all of the standards found within the zoning ordinance, and hope that you have received the plans well. We're happy to answer any questions and hope that you see fit to approve the site plan tonight with conditions recommended by staff in your packet. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We may join you back or bring you back up, but we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. A few things to chew on to note, just reading the tea leaves here. Obviously, the parking one is one of concern, but also, you know, I just thinking through other projects we've approved in the not-so-distant past, I take to what Dusty was talking about as far as the meeting space and kind of how we've looked at that. If there's any clarity that we can bring out of that, that's one point in my mind that I just want to come back to staff on. Additionally, another thing is performance guarantees, performance bonds on the actual improvement or build-out of the facility. That was a couple things that's brought up a couple times that I kind of want maybe Peter to speak toward at the end of it, because I cannot remember if we've put those in place for other surrounding hotel properties or other nearby like uses in the not-so-distant past, but maybe just a point of contention. Is there anything else like that jumps out at folks that we need to kind of kick around?
Well, there was the question about what could happen if the lots are separated. And
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah, well, adding to that would be, aside from the separating of the lots, is whether or not any provision could be made to forestall a sale of the satellite parking area.
A separation of that
Yeah.
individually.
Yeah, right out, that could be sold.
one comment that we should address is in a number of the letters, there was concern that there was not adequate notice. And I think we can speak to the notice that was sent and the timing of that and the appropriateness there, just so everybody understands that process.
So that being said, maybe we'll turn it over to Claire. If you could maybe kind of help us iron out this parking delineation first.
Sure. I'll speak to some of the items and then I'll turn it over to Peter. So there was reference to in the past that the township has approved meeting space in other hotels. I believe one example, just in recent conversations earlier this evening, the Residence Inn is one example. I believe that Grand Beach also has a meeting space. I think Cherry Tree Inn has a meeting space. These meeting spaces are smaller than what's proposed. I think about half the size of the current conference center. So looking at our zoning ordinance, we do have requirements from a parking perspective for a meeting space on its own. But again, looking at a meeting space that's in tandem with the hotel, that's something that is not explicitly addressed in our zoning ordinance.
Claire,
I can make a
ask
few,
question?
yeah.
What about when they have a restaurant? I thought we had,
We do have requirements for
Additional parking for
restaurants. I
restaurants.
think it's one space per 75 square feet,
right,
and that's
so I mean,
specifically
whether it's a
stated.
meeting space or a restaurant, it's still, there is something that we do require.
Right. That's correct. That's something that we specifically state in our ordinance, a hotel with a restaurant.
I just want to comment from talking to Claire, because I thought I was here on a different issue, which now things have changed around, so I had a discussion before the meeting with Claire. My understanding is the conference center, of course, was already previously approved, and that the rubric used by the planning commission for the conference center was under section 3E, dance hall, pool and billiard parlors, roller rink, exhibition halls, which of course conference centers are often used for those types of items there. And therefore, the parking was set up with a limitation, not based upon the fire code maximum occupancy of the conference center, but that the limitation currently is 94 based upon the parking that was previously approved, which is 47 spots for the conference center itself, okay? Now you're looking at a, potential consolidation, and also to get a look at the issue of Tamarack, which at its time of approval was provided one spot per unit. And, I understand, how those units are built and how large those units are. I believe, but I haven't seen the planning commission record from back then, and maybe it's not even in it, that logically the one spot per unit was probably put in there because of the fractional ownership, which was known at the time that the development was created, and that fractional ownership technically states in the master deed, although there have been amendments, I didn't see an amendment to that portion of it, that each fractional owner is assigned their weeks, and that they're not to have other co-owners during those weeks, at the units. But obviously, that doesn't impact, family members and the reality of what's going on. And frankly, sometimes these things are not necessarily enforced, and so logically, you are going to see more people. Be that as it may, you have also on the table already the pre-existing approval of the one spot, per unit, of which I think I'm not sure if it included, because there's 4 commercial units to begin with, at the lodge too, from looking at the master deed. So I presume those commercial units are the same as the other type, and the lot, and the parking was the same?
I believe the original approval
Okay.
was 75 units and 85 spaces. So
Okay.
I think that there was 10
All right.
for.
So those are the things, because frankly, the planning commission has a lot of flexibility, under the ordinance. You have various ways of looking at things. I know that's going to materially change, under the new ordinance, but we're here with what's existing. And if it's determined that there isn't, adequate parking, you have an amendment to your ordinance, Amendment 1-23, which was approved back last year, just about this time, maybe a little bit less, about 11 months ago here. And I know there was talk of a traffic study. I'm not sure there's been a parking study, related to how this is consolidated. And the other items that you have to consider related to the, they are separate parcels, but uniform for purposes of parking, is a parking type of agreement, that works. What works, across the street as opposed to the same side where the hotel and the Tamarack Lodge is located? Those are the things that you're going to have to parse through and ask questions of the developer. Maybe the across-street parking is an area that's strictly reserved first for employees before overflow, things of that nature. So, those are the, again, you have quite a bit of flexibility under your ordinance here. So that's good, but it makes your decision a little bit harder. And so those are the main items there. But I think it's important to consider what's already been approved on the ground as you go through this, and then determine how you want to tie it together.
Thank you for that. Mindy?
So if we had the 20, whatever units per 29 parking spaces, and now we know that there's the lockouts, so there's really 43 units. Is this the time to look at that? I mean, do we bring that back up even though it was approved before with the 29 spaces, when we know now that there's actually 43 that could be rented out in a single evening?
mean, frankly, they could rent out, and go by the room, if it was through an Airbnb, or maybe it was done in the past before you even had that ordinance. It may have been ongoing all the way through. I'm not sure it's a revisit per what occurred at that time. I guess we'd have to investigate if you wanted to see if they're, if they're violating the approval at the time. I think it's probably better to look at what's existing on the ground and at least preserve what's there, and then ensure that there's still adequate parking and access for, make this development work. But, it certainly shouldn't be a reduction.
Question.
Would it be,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
You said we have a lot of flexibility to be creative around this parking issue. Is it within the authority of the Planning Commission that we could designate those 72 spots across the street as being solely for the hotel and not to be other uses except for the hotel?
Well, I think it's my understanding, and maybe when I ask the applicant, I think that's pretty much what they're proposing, is why they have that.
No, my understanding is that those 72 is also for the Tamarack owners, so that if a spot is there, then they just have, their overflow now becomes, there's no designated place for the owners.
The potential way to get to that is that's why I mentioned the previously approved parking spaces, is your ability to at least protect what has already been previously approved for parking for Tamarack to begin with, which may force the issue of requiring that the parking across the street strictly be for the hotels.
And hotel workers.
Staff.
would it be inappropriate that we ask that those 29 spaces be dedicated and assigned? Or does that go through their bylaws?
Well, I mean, they have their bylaws. There's ways that once the parking is set aside for, as already approved, for example, for Tamarack, there's ways that, they get stickers, there could be parking numbers for those units, and, tollway rules. I mean, obviously, it's more difficult because you're going to have a larger, you have 2 more hotels coming in the conference center, but that's how, those things tend to be managed. So that's the, the best at the planning commission level is not to micromanage how the parking is preserved. That's for, that's for them.
Yeah, I think when we've talked through the number of times about reductions of parking requirements, it was tied to putting the onus on that operator to ensure that they could take care of their guests, more or less. I don't think it was necessarily a health, safety, welfare from, wanting people necessarily to cross the street, but I guess it was at the owner's discretion to make that choice. And in this case, that's kind of what they have at their, on their proposal so far. What I'm mostly concerned is kind of, Peter, what you were alluding to was the impact on the existing tenants, the existing ownership of a, surrounded piece of property here. And how do we kind of eliminate or not eliminate or mitigate kind of this impact on them? I mean, they have to understand that, development is development, and they didn't own the properties adjacent to it. I don't get that sentiment this evening at all, but I don't think it's unreasonable, and maybe that's where we can come into play, is to delineate and dedicate various areas, and maybe that's where the applicant can kind of speak to that in terms of outlining your game plan or your strategy to address that, specifically maybe in the summer months, and that would maybe kind of help bring some clarity to us in terms of how, those protections could be put in place for those who are already in existence. Maybe this would be a good time. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I say something before he speaks?
Absolutely.
So my thoughts are, is like where Peter was going, is that we're dealing with, at a Tamarack with a fractional, you've got an HOA. That HOA is supposed to protect its owners. So maybe they need to redo it and whatever, and, I don't know what their HOA says for parking. Maybe it says 1 car per unit, I don't know. But so it sounds like that's being broken. But I think that, so you've got 2 different things. You've got the HOA, and then you've got the new hotel developments. So, obviously, it'd be no different than developments going into HOAs that, even though it'd be all one owner, that HOA needs to protect its owners. Maybe it gets rewritten, and then the rest, can be delegated however he chooses.
And that's why I mentioned
Yeah.
looking at strictly from the perspective of what was already approved.
Right.
Because that is related to zoning. How it's managed is not an issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who are you and what do you do?
Josh Werfel, the Werfel family owns 43% of all the fractional shares, including the commercial space inside the lodge, as well as the other outlots. I guess, which question would you like me to address first, Mr. Leonard, and so that I can move through how you would like to address these? Between myself and my family, we'd be happy to address them in sequence. Just let me know which one you'd like to start with.
I'm thinking maybe talk through operations in terms of staffing.
So first off, in reference to operations, one of the hot spots that was mentioned by a couple of the gentlemen and ladies in the audience, in reference to the hall, that meeting space, we have, as I mentioned to Claire earlier, I think last week and today, we've held off on all reservations for 26, with the understanding we're not really sure where our adjacent parcels are going to be developed. Currently, for this summer season, we have a vast number of weddings. Those wedding blocks have been moved to the Alexandra Inn, and so that we could facilitate parking between the Alexandra Inn because the weddings are there, and then we're facilitating our Friday and Saturday weddings accordingly so that we can manage the parking appropriately. One of the reasons that we wanted to do these outlots with hotel rooms is because we're missing out on a lot of the business travel that's in the off-season that wants to use the facility, the conference space, Harbor Brook Hall, but we're losing them to either the resort or to the Great Wolf Lodge, taking them out of the area because we don't have the rooms to facilitate them. We need more rooms in order to facilitate these styles of guests, and by putting the groups at a hotel that's adjacent to the facility, it'll allow us to operate it and still stay within the parking thresholds as we've laid out. In reference to staff is we believe the staff numbers for parking spaces is adequate. You have to understand that staff is very hard in Traverse City right now. A large portion of our staff are H-2B visa workers. They don't drive. And so as a result, they live in our staff housing and they take beta buses to the facility, or they ride a bike. So we, again, are very confident in our staffing numbers. Please understand that as Harbor Brook Hall currently is operated, it's staffless. We provide the meeting space, we do the setup, and then we don't have staff on site. This is an open venue for that type of event. In reference to the hotel operations, we typically run one, maybe two people at the front desk. That would change, obviously, as we bring more people, more hotel rooms on board. And then cleaning would be based on numbers of rooms rented, just pure and simple. That fluctuates wildly between peak summer and December 31st. So, and as mentioned by Claire, I would like to point out you had 1,600 square feet of meeting space that was approved across the road just recently at the Residence Inn. I know Cherry Tree Inn has a capacity in the 50 to 100, and they have zero parking. They barely have enough for their own rooms. And then you have the Sugar Beach and Grand Beach. I know had meeting facilities when we developed them. I don't know if they currently still are there. So I know that there are other hotels inside of East Bay besides those that weren't required to have meeting space, as well as the Hyatt House, which you just gave an extension on the site plan. They have meeting space that did not have set aside parking for that meeting space. So just as clarification, we did our homework on this. We did our homework on the operations side. We are comfortable with these numbers. I understand where the owners are. I understand what you're talking about in reference to the 29 spots. I would like to point out that on Tamarack proper, they do not own 29 parking spots. They are currently using easement parking spots to the west, and actually 3 of the parking spots currently to the east were built over the lot line. Not my that was well before my time, so you can't point the finger at me. But when we did, and we were actually, when the site surveys came out and the lines were pulled, we were actually a little bit taken back by those parking spots as well. By combining this, and I've had discussions with Claire, and making this all one pooled parking area, and the appropriate agreements would be in place, as well as in order for the property to function, it would have to also include in the parking agreement that the land on 4 Mile could not be sold as a separate entity. That's only common sense for an operator. You have to have adequate parking, and I believe in that. So that was something I had a conversation with Claire on. That's something I'm not opposed to. The dedicated 29 parking spots is a tricky issue because you would be, the commission would be forcing our group to give dedicated parking on land that Tamarack Lodge doesn't own as part of the HOA. And that's not something that I can address without talking to an attorney, because then all of a sudden I'm giving away parking spots on land that's not owned or managed technically by the HOA. Now, in reference to one of the other gentleman's questions, if this gets broken up and doesn't get developed as one parcel, then one of the gentlemen was worried about cutting the lot. As we all know, they would lose the parking. However, the cross-connect would always have to exist. That's something that has been put in place by the township for a number of years, that I've had lots of discussions over the years in all kinds of projects that we've done. So I don't see that as a stumbling block in any way.
From an operational standpoint, can you speak to kind of education of your tenants, not your tenants, your users, in the hospitality angle exclusively, meaning are they informed? Are they aware of kind of the layout and the function of where they could park and what that looks like?
Are you talking about the current people of Tamarack? So
No, future folks occupying.
So obviously, we haven't opened this particular project yet, but in the event that we are approved tonight and we do move forward in the coming years to do this build-out, the check-in would be at the main lodge, and then people would be directed appropriately to whatever building they're going to be in. For lack of a better way, building A, B, and C. The ownership inside of the main lodge would have access to the facilities of building A, B, and C, whether it's the fitness room or sauna, if we're able to put one in, as well as the pavilion and the pool area. So the idea is that it's going to be one large facility where there'll be a lot of amenities that a lot of guests will be able to spread out and use across the whole site. Operationally, our front desk is going to have the onus of being able to educate the people when they arrive on what facilities are available and where they're located. So that's no different than any other standard operation of any hotel throughout the world, typically. So it's just a matter of management and staff training. Yeah, I guess, any other questions? There's a lot, I'm sure.
I'm doing all.
Several comments within the letters that were sent in about handicap parking. And so that's obviously an ADA requirement, right? And all of that is met?
That is met.
Okay.
So whenever you're doing a project of this nature, whether it's a small hotel to this is a very large complex, one of the first things that any developer has to do is determine the number of rooms, and therefore that dictates how many handicap accessible rooms you have to have, and therefore that dictates how many, within the law, how many accessible parking spots you have to have.
Okay.
And so those are standards that we can't move around.
I just want to make sure we address that on behalf of
no,
the public. so
Absolutely.
thank you.
That's a requirement.
So Josh, not to like beat a dead horse, but I just need to make sure I understand this whole HOA and the parking for Tamarack.
Sure.
So the HOA apparently says one parking spot per unit, but are you saying that, I don't understand, so they don't own the parking, or the parking doesn't?
Well, let me clarify for you, Ms. Renee. Between this line And if you can see this line here, which cuts these, which bisects these three, there is not 29 spots here.
Okay.
In this area. So my point is that with inside of Tamarack, which would be between this line and this line,
Right.
there's not 29 spots. Now I design.
What did the original, I mean, when they built that building, was it supposed to have 29 legal spots?
I
Okay.
don't know. I do know that this part of the parking lot is part of an easement for them to use, but it's not owned by them. So that was where, when the original proposal came from Claire about doing the dedicated 29 spots, my only pause is that without a significant reconfiguration here, and these technically are over the line, I don't have 29 spots that I can put a sign on without them being on different properties. Now, if we do it all as one large development, then that is something that we would entertain. But if the planning commission doesn't see fit to approve it as one large development, then as the owner of this lot, I'm not interested at all in having a dedicated spot.
No, that makes sense.
Put on this, and I'm not really interested in owning this lot, having these 3 spots being here because they're over the line.
Totally understand that. Okay, so basically, yeah.
That's where my hesitation is that it just depends on how it's approved.
Right.
Is to what I can do, because at some point in time, whether it's my family or it's somebody else, these lots will be developed one way or the other, and I can't hinder this lot with.
That is 100% understandable, so yeah, I wouldn't even question that. I just find it very interesting that there's like a discrepancy with the HOA.
Well, there's an easement, so isn't it a legal easement? And isn't it already there?
It's presuming it's a non-exclusive easement that was in place there, so that's probably where the parking came from. So what's actually in the lot there, I was just talking to Claire, is 22 spots that are wholly within the
And I believe, in reference to what Peter's saying, also we'll be adding spots here by removing this island. So I think that at the end of the day, we can get it up a little bit higher than that, closer to between 24 to 27. I can't get to 29 without removing another island, which puts me into a green space violation. So I don't want to do that. But at the same token, we as a group don't have a problem moving stuff. The problem is that also these are all handicap spots, which that would be inappropriate for me to dedicate a handicap spot to one of the owner rooms.
Yeah, completely agree.
So I can't do that. So that discounts these spots, and they would put the onus on putting them over on this side.
Right.
So.
Well, I have a couple concerns with the parking. You don't have any handicap parking on the west lot at all. And then one of the spots that is on the east lot is actually on the Tamarack Lodge property.
I apologize, I don't understand what you're referring to.
The west side, the west building, there's no handicap spots in front of that at all.
And the reason why was because we provided it closest to the sidewalk so that we could have adequate access in. Now, we built this design with the idea that this was going to be a joint parking area all the way through, and not that they were going to ever be divided. And that was something that Claire and I talked about, so that's why we put all of the handicap together in one area. It makes the most sense.
Then why do you have a handicap in front of the other building?
Because it's too far away from this area. So I ascertained that it's easier to put handicap parking spots in this area here and be able to service 2 buildings because you're in the same proximity. And then we put handicap here in order to service the west building.
Where's the front door on the west building?
There's a side door and a front door. And it can be.
Your other west.
Oh, sorry. There's the front door is located here and the side door is located here. So there's two different ways in, because there's no lobby, so to speak, and there's no front desk. People will tend to funnel in actually closest to the stairway, which the stairway is located on the side of the building. By average. That isn't everybody, but by average.
Well, I just, think about my handicapped parents, and they would never, want to walk any further than they actually had to get to the front
In
door of
reference
it.
to the ADA parking, Josh noted the 2 additional spaces that are being added here. The front door to the west building is here. That's pretty much equidistant to the distance between the existing ADA spaces and the existing front door of the existing lodge building. So the distances are comparable. We concentrated the ADA spaces in one location because we have to provide an accessible route that doesn't exceed certain grades, and it's easier to do that with one spot where you're transitioning from the parking lot to the sidewalk, if that makes sense. So
allowed to ask any questions?
Not right now.
Thank you.
So that was the reason for, consolidating the ADA parking there. I don't have my scale with me, but the distance between the westernmost ADA space shown here and the front door of the west building is almost the same as the distance between the easternmost space and the front door at the existing lodge building. There's not a whole lot of difference. And then, of course, we have the additional ADA space over by the east building.
Any other questions of the commission?
I just want to be clear on another thing. You mentioned about talking about this as one development, if you were to do it as one cohesive thing, does that mean that you combine the lots parcel-wise? They become one parcel? Or?
It can't, so legally, to the best of my knowledge, and Peter might have a better understanding than I, but legally, because of the Tamarack Lodge itself, I can't legally combine it with. However, we would be looking at conjoining everything into underneath one umbrella so that they can't be split. And that's the only way, from my point of view, my family's point of view, operationally it works in this current configuration. However, if this isn't approved, we have looked at other to develop the lots independently. So, I mean, that's where we're at this point in time. We'd rather do this project because it makes more sense operationally. But I defer to the commission.
And I think what you're looking at, I mean, obviously parking is the big issue, and that's the agreement that can consolidate it. How they consolidate and integrate their amenities between each other, I don't believe is an issue for the planning commission under zoning.
Yeah, and just for clarification, I mean, nor is their master deed or their board HOA and the notice that was given and all this stuff, that's beyond our purview here. We're looking at this development as presented to us from a land use statute. Okay.
So that raises a question for me, just out of curiosity. So let's just say that the way you want to do it this way did not get approved, and you moved forward on the individual lots. Wouldn't that ultimately hurt the parking that's currently existing with Tamarack? Because now, they're no longer going to be able to technically use some of that overflow.
That's correct.
So, I'm just bringing that to the...
They still can use it. They have an easement.
They would be limited to one parking spot per unit, which is 29. And the west lot then would also be able to pick up the balance of what they have on this, which is approximately over 30, there's 58 spots on this side, so the balance of that would be 35. That would be de facto to the west lawn. So, and that's per the approval. That is not what we're proposing. That is not where we want to take this project.
My concern is that I believe that because the conference center is a separate building, it can't be looked at as the same as that for which is in a hotel. And therefore, I believe that it does have to have parking.
I would like to remind you that it was part of the waterfront, and at that time, it was considered part of the property. And they used all of the parking as it's laid out, as well as the 4 mile lot was part of the waterfront and used for parking for both staff and conference center and hoteliers.
And I would like to remind you that you just came to Planning Commission and said, here's our parking, here's our proposed use, and we approved on it. So we've already changed from the waterfront to this different use that's already gone through Planning Commission. So I believe that there needs to be parking associated with that. I'm concerned that there's only 19 parking spaces in front of that east building. I don't think that's enough for 80 units. I'm also concerned at the fact that we've got somewhere between 29 and 43 units in the Tamarack Lodge that doesn't have appropriate parking in front of it on that property. That's a huge issue to me. I believe that there's an easement, I understand that there's an easement, but there's a problem there. The 80 units on the next hotel, we're already way past our parking for this other hotel, this conference center, and the Tamarack Lodge before we put in another hotel, in my brain, doing the math. I believe that the parking on the 4 Mile should be for this property. It would be great if it's for the users, those with extra people with them, extra cars, campers, all that, not campers, but boats, or water toys, whatever you have. That should be what that overflow parking for, is what my brain says. I think we have a parking problem all the way across here, but I have no idea how to solve it because of the fact that there is not enough on that Tamarack Lodge property to fit what is being used by Tamarack Lodge right now. I do have friends that used to own in here. I have been here in July. There is no parking for those 43 units that are out there right now. All those parking spots. And I won't say the lot on the east side. Everything up front is completely used.
Well, that's because the previous management didn't enforce the 1 car per spot rule. And that is something that we have started to do. And that is something that is written it was approved and it's in the bylaws. And that's what we will be using going forward. No matter how tonight ends up, we will be limiting Tamarack Lodge to owners to 1 car per unit, as the ordinance says. And it goes down to 29, so that means, that's where our limit's going to be. So, I mean, that was what it was approved, is that correct? Back when it was originally approved, it was 29 spots. And that's what's in the bylaws, and that's what we will be limiting the ownership to, is because we have had problems last year where we had 1 condo come in with 10 cars. That can't happen, no matter where you are in Traverse City. We don't, no hotel in town allows more than 1 on the East Bay stretch, being beachfront. I can't speak for across the road, however, I do know the Avid doesn't even have enough parking spots for the number of rooms they have. And I know that they are limited to 1 car per hotel room. And that was what was approved for this project originally, not by us. We have started, as of last year, started enforcing that because of the problems that we had with people coming in with 5, 6, 8, and we had a 10-car person, and actually, there were too many people in the room to begin with. But that was an owner, and that's why we continuously send out notices in reference to that. And we will move forward with that.
The other concern I have is that I'm not sure that you need 70 bike parking spots. That seems a little bit.
I will say that I can speak only for reference to the Alexander Inn, that last year we had a Peloton on multiple occasions of 30 people come in to use the facilities. And that doesn't include our staff. So, and our staff, the vast majority of our staff last year at the Alexander Inn ride bikes. So, again, we stayed within the ordinance, and we actually proved last year at the Alexander Inn that actually works.
Is it Alexandra or Alexandria?
No.
Okay.
Alexandra.
Okay. I always thought it was Alexandria.
No, just.
Okay, all right.
I did too, Mindy, you're not alone.
I swear.
But thank you for that clarification.
There's no line.
Well, I looked today, and I'm like, after reading all these letters, it's going, all these people spelled it wrong, and then I looked today, and I'm like, oh, apparently I was wrong.
I think in the interest of what to do next, right? We've kind of talked through this parking thing ad nauseum.
Get one clarification.
Absolutely. absolutely.
This is a use by right. As it's proposed with the event center and parking, it meets the current ordinance as written. Yes?
There's a little bit of gray there because we have flexibility in our ordinance to allow dual, like have one facility share, or two facilities share one parking space.
Okay.
So under our ordinance, the planning commission could approve this, but, you know, the planning commission has a judgment call to make as to whether or not this is adequate parking based on the information provided by the applicant. From my perspective, the hotel, or the conference center is a use, and the hotel is a use. And so we need to consider the parking needs of both. But I do think, you know, based on the information, there are some opportunities for shared parking.
What I was going to go with is the number is the number, and I'm kind of got that in my head in terms of like what's provided and what's required, right? But I think what the applicant's explaining and what I have in my mind, and the whole reason why I kind of got behind like this reduction in parking is it's based on operations and who's doing the work here. And that to me, I think if I had more clarity, I would feel a little more certain about that, just in writing as a part of the proposal to try and help explain that. We've done something like this in other cases where we've asked for clarification on what you're doing with your fuel delivery on a specific spot. Where is it going? How are you handling it? What regulations or guidelines are you following to make sure that it's handled properly? I think that would make me feel a little bit more flexible in terms of just getting on board with this layout, was to better understand or have guidance to say that, you know, you have staff that's going to primarily park or be required to park in the off-site lot first. And that, you know, hotel guests, or maybe it's even just conference visitors, I don't even know what that looks like. I guess I just want to put that in front of you. I don't know where everybody else is at on this one, but
Would you like me to address some of those right now, Mr. Leonard? I'd be happy to.
yes, but I almost feel like I'm kind of running into a wall with all the intake of the information because we've had so much of it on this one topic. It's almost like I'd rather have something to respond to that would be affiliated with the application, so that staff and legal counsel has a chance to kind of go through that as well, and gives us some time to kind of breathe on this subject, because we've been hit with it for an hour plus. But I'm one voice. I would love to hear from others in terms of where you're at on this.
I'll be happy. So, I've been an advocate on this board for reducing parking because I don't like parking. I think one of the things I noticed today on the site was that you basically have on the east side a sheet of asphalt that's just running off into the bay. And I think that, reducing parking is in the best interest of our township from a standpoint of the other 9 months. Because the other 9 months, that empty sheet of asphalt just keeps running water off. The other thing is I generally tend to defer to the owners of something about what their parking requirements should be. If they're grossly inadequate, they're likely to feel some backlash about it, and they're going to suffer. And I don't know operations. So, that's kind of where I'd come down.
Isn't that sheet of asphalt you're referring to on the east side, isn't that the extension of 4 Mile Road?
No, on the east side, the other east side.
I'm sorry.
Where you were walking today.
Yeah.
It runs right into the bay.
Well, right, okay. And, I'm with you, but I'm doing the numbers, and I'm saying, okay, fine, you got 160 hotel rooms, you got 29 allowed for Tamarack, That gives me 189, I think somewhere 8 staff. So that's 197, which currently you've got 198, I think. You know, there's like one. But yet, on the same time, we know that 29 is not sufficient for what's going on in Tamarack, that there's a 43, so if we went on that side, you know, your same math is like 211. Either way, I mean, however we're talking about this, we got a parking problem here. And I think that somehow a little more thought may need to be put into this thing to try and resolve to all parties, because unlike some of the references we have made and the example we have made of different hotels, this really isn't. It's sort of like an apples and oranges, because you've got 2 hotels, but then you have this, you know, condominium slash, you know, fractional ownership, which causes a whole different dynamic with respect to the traffic. And just like the traffic study here that was presented, when they added the additional numbers, they say, okay, fine, we're adding like 900 trips. I think 1,000, isn't that 1,000 is the tripping point? But on the 900 trips, they were only talking about the additional 160 rooms. They weren't talking about, nor did they factor in, what the Tamarack Lodge itself would be. So I think, wouldn't that be part of any study, which would, I presume, would take us over the 1,000?
The way the ordinance is written, it's any incremental increase that a proposed development is creating.
I know, I understand.
Yeah.
But, you know, we do a lot of things that we try and make some flexibility, and the thing turns around and causes some issues. I wasn't going to exactly put it that way, but that's what I'm saying, is that right now, I'm somewhat confused as to the resolution on this parking issue. And I don't know if, as much as I like what the concept is, there is there's some serious problems in trying to accommodate the different type of ownerships, because in a hotel situation, there are no owners that you have to accommodate. They are guests, or they are paying guests, but yet we have this whole Tamarack situation that has to be resolved.
Do you propose that we break it up into multiple hotels that are different owners completely?
I have no
And then-
idea. I have no idea. That's not my, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying is that somehow, maybe a little more thought has to go into this, and how that works, I don't know at this point.
I have a question with respect to the Tamarack. So they're supposed to have 29 spots, one owner, or one spot per owner. However, it doesn't fit within the property, but they did have an easement. The 43 lockout units are still considered under that single owner or multiple owners, right? So we can't really add those on.
Well, you got to think about it, though, because
Let me get there.
Sorry.
So right now, our limitations are with what is written in their agreements, and we're not going to get involved in that, that's up to you, is the 29 spots. We don't account for the 43 lockouts, nor
14.
43 lockouts, there's 14.
14, excuse me. Okay, okay, I misheard that.
Previous management didn't really render it.
Okay.
Because they have inherent issues, and as one of the owners pointed out, social media has more than happy to point out the issues. They have a small window, the majority of them, that go into a hallway. So as a result, a lot of the guests that do stay there, non-owners, do not like it. And so we had, when we came in, as a management group, we tried to help the ownerships generate revenue, because we had extra parking at
Okay.
that time. And so we try to, and we have been renting those. However, in light of all of this going down to 29, we are quickly realizing that we'll probably eliminate those as a rental option and take them back out of the rental pool in order to take it back down to the 29 spaces as indicated. So,
I was trying to figure
and that
out.
should be no different than what one of the gentlemen did say, that social media is what it is, and booking engines are what they are, and the reviews are what they are. And we have done our best to help maximize the owner's revenue, but at the same token, we, as a management group, have been taking the wood on the chin in reference to renting these rooms, and we have slowed our pace in putting these in the inventory because of some of those prior to this, but in reference to the parking issue, we're looking at taking it back down to 29 and not using those as rentable lockouts.
Where I struggle with is use by right. They've done their homework. They've done their math based on the 29 spots. I have a hard time saying no. But I can agree with you as far as a little bit better of a plan going forward on dedicating some parking.
I don't have problems dedicating the 29 spots, even across the easement, if we get approved for the whole project. I don't, but I want to be very careful as a developer that I don't overstep what I'm promising if it's not allowed. So again, it's not that I'm trying to be, I'm just being cautious for for my family.
As you should.
So, but doing a dedicated 29 spots, one for each room, because that's technically the way we'd be looked at, is not something that we can't do. We just have to figure out which ones they're going to be, because we have problems with these technically 4 spots if we're not approved, so that's one of the issues, right, Ms. Ellerly? If it's not approved, then I don't want to do the 29 spots, because then I've got an issue I don't have 29 spots to give up. But if it is approved, then doing the 29 spots is not going to be an issue, because we'll be required by the township in order to do a guaranteed cross-parking arrangement in order to make sure that the parcels don't get split. So nobody wants a partial built facility and then the lots get split. That can't happen. It doesn't do anybody any good, including the family. So we want to make sure that should this get approved tonight, that the parking arrangement it would be a requirement, as I think Claire had indicated in her, and then we don't have a problem putting in the 29 spots. But I don't want to guarantee it if I'm
I'm not a planning commission, I'm just trying to help them here, obviously, as the township attorney. So you would, if it's approved, you would guarantee the pre-approved 29 spots for the Tamarack Lodge north of US 31?
Correct.
Okay, so that's one clarification there. That's important.
I think,
Are we allowed to make that a condition or
Sounds like
not
a
because it's
condition.
part of the HOA?
But what about the
Well, I
conference
mean, it
center?
would be approved with that condition, and we don't have any opposition on the part of the developer, so you could place that as a condition as part of the agreement.
Okay, can I ask a question about the conference center? This might help
Say it again.
maybe your concerns, Mindy?
Renee's got it, I'll listen.
So this is obviously a very unique property. Like, I don't think we've had anything like this. So when you're not really making it all one property, but it's all being treated as one, so maybe, Peter, this might even be slightly for you. We've had lots of other places with meeting centers. Will this get treated like those other hotels with meeting centers because it's all?
Conference centers and meeting centers, whether in the building itself or outside of the hotel, is not an uncommon accessory use of the hotel.
Right.
I mean, I think that the main concern that Mindy raised, and I think, Claire was somewhat concerned, is, if we keep that together, that's fine, okay? But if there's a future division, failure of the condominium, that it happens on rare occasions, can that conference center be divided off and then run as a standalone banquet facility, for example, or
Right.
something of that nature? we don't know exactly what the future will bring, but right now it appears to be an accessory to the hotel development, and that's how it's used, and that's not uncommon with other developments throughout the area and throughout the country.
But didn't we just approve it as a conference center being standalone, so why?
Well, it was because, I don't know what the history is. See, that's an unknown to me. I just found that out tonight because I didn't look at the minutes or how that occurred, so.
We did that to begin with because we didn't own the Tamarack at the time.
No, I understand that, but my point being is if we did it this way and then something failed with the Tamarack and like you said, it got split off and sold, wouldn't it be going back to the way we just approved it?
Maybe not. There could be a completely new development, and they'd come back.
But then they'd have to come back before us.
That's right.
So we're protected, right?
Yeah.
Am I looking at that wrong?
Well, there's no way to have, but the parking that's in front of it is associated with all the other sites, so you couldn't redevelop it.
But we already approved it on its own.
Now you're changing it.
Right, but like, most of the time, a hotel with a conference center is using it for the guest. So not all the time, but, so I understand your,
Well, operationally, the reason that we're doing what we're doing is because we saw the need for conference space, meeting space, event space on the east side of Traverse City. And we proved that to ourselves by when we first started doing this and we started selling the weddings and booking the room blocks at the Alexandra. And we realized real quickly that as more people came to Traverse City and wanted to use Traverse City, that we couldn't facilitate, even though we had the meeting space for them, we couldn't facilitate the rooms for them, and we are losing them. And so, that's the reason that we came up with this plan. And we targeted the Tamarack because we were after the two lots. And it worked, but, and so from an operational point of view, my point is that the majority of the summer season, which is the busiest season, we all know that, the majority of the events that are taking place vastly at Harbor Brook Hall are weddings. And the majority of them are all Saturdays. We do have Fridays, but these people are booking their room blocks at the Alexandra to facilitate their travel. In the future, like I said, we haven't booked any for 26. We've put a hold on 26, all based on actually tonight. Our goal would be to put those room blocks inside of Tamarack in order to facilitate the weddings and the appropriate car traffic. And then going into the shoulder seasons, off seasons, during midweek when the parking lots are not busy, as anybody can attest to, most of the guests in the Traverse City area that stay at the waterfront properties all leave during the day. They typically all go to the wineries, if they can get there now with the traffic, but they go to the wineries, they go to Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes, et cetera, and it would be our job to facilitate any type of meeting space in those periods when the hotel is not busy.
But the bottom line is you're merging.
Everything.
You're merging, so the previous approval, because you didn't have an ownership, this is the new animal as a new project here.
That's correct.
So it's being merged.
And that's part of the agreement that we had discussed with zoning, is we're merging the parking lots across.
I guess that's the thing that makes me the most comfortable is that you're merging it. So now it, to me, as separate properties, it creates a whole new set of issues. So I don't know. And like you said, it's a use by right. I do appreciate if you want to, I don't know exactly if you were saying let's put a little more, I just don't know why we can't address a few things as conditions.
We probably could. I guess I was just thinking if, it would be nice, I'm just thinking out loud here. It would be nice to just kind of have some of those operational things that we've spoke about in writing. And I don't know what that looks like in a condition, and I think it'd be easier for us to respond to it with what you are saying that you want to do.
I would like to see it as a condition, and I'm asking for approval tonight.
Dan, I'll just, there's a couple recommended conditions in the staff report. One is that the existing hotel condominium site shall have one dedicated and labeled parking space on the north side of US 31. So that would be 29 existing spaces that are dedicated on the north side. Another one is that a formal off-site parking agreement shall be reviewed and approved by the township attorney. That would be both for the 4 Mile as well as for the conference center. So those parking agreements would be reviewed and approved by the township attorney. The other one is that this approval is contingent on combination of lots into one parcel, which sounds like it's not possible, or tying the parcels as one development parcel by another legal means. And that would ensure that, in the future, that couldn't be split up before coming back to this board and reassessing.
I think that's what I was getting at, so I apologize. That is what I was looking for.
So is there anything missing in there that we've discussed? How's that make you feel, Mindy? I know that the parking's an issue for you.
And one other just condition that's on there is that I put a performance guarantee as determined by the Department of Planning and Zoning to ensure that the site is restored to its original condition in the event that the development does not move forward. So our ordinance allows for a performance guarantee to basically restore the site, the grounds, that we don't have a mechanism in our ordinance to put a performance guarantee to require the
amenities
to be put into place.
And the amenities are things that are not related to the land use permit or the procedure.
You mean like the pool and stuff like that?
That has nothing to do with what you're approving.
So we can't,
No.
yeah.
But the performance guarantee is mainly to avoid, like the Pitt and Petoskey
Right.
example.
Right.
And I think we have one that's actually coming up here in the township where you have a performance guarantee, is to be able to restore the property so that it's back to use again in the future. That's the only purpose behind that.
There's nothing else.
So, I have a,
Yep.
I recall I had a tent in the parking lot a few weeks ago. How do we prevent that from taking up parking spaces in the future?
That tent was for an activity that took place, and it was only in place for about 4 hours while they prepped food, and they came right down. Are you asking that we don't ever put a tent back in that space even though the people are staying at the property? I'm just asking the need because
It's parking spaces that were used for the tent. I mean, and we have a tent. I mean, I got to complain about it.
Did you really?
I did.
Come on. Okay. And that's, and
I didn't see it, but I got to complain about it.
it was there for the caterers to stage for the event.
That's what I was told.
For the event that was there, and once they were done staging for the event, they took the tent down. So it did not actively damage anything, and it did not take up parking that pushed people anywhere at that. I mean, obviously, I understand your thought process here, but.
I didn't know that it was there for 4 hours. I just knew it was there. I got a complaint,
They set it up in the morning, and they took it down either that night or the morning before. They started dismantling it that night or the morning, and it was gone by the next morning. So it was used for 4 hours. How long it was there was less than 24. So I didn't know that was an issue, so it was trying to facilitate the caterers, so.
I get why you did it. I don't have any questions on why.
I didn't do it, there was a different event person.
But the concern I have is that I think.
From an operational point, let me clarify, from an operational point of view, in the event that this is approved and in the event that we have someone that asks for that type of parking spaces, because it was 5 parking spaces-ish that they took up, that would have to be determined what time of the year that it's being done in, whether or not it can be facilitated, because from an operational point of view, if we were in July, that wouldn't happen. But in March, it was April, right? In April,
There was probably nothing else in the parking lot.
Exactly.
So with the change from the 43 units to the 29, but to me, that doesn't account for staff at all, but if we combine the staff on the Tamarack across the whole thing, I'm okay with that. I'm leery about the fact that we're not adding any spots for the conference center. I am leery about that, but I get it. I would like to somehow make it so that this offsite is for staff first, right? Absolutely.
That's a guarantee issue, to be really honest with you. For 9 months of the year, probably not an issue. For 3 months of the year, it's definitely.
Maybe 4.
Maybe, well, it's all based on what Traverse City does. We all know that.
Exactly. I think I'm okay with this.
So that would be...
And most of you,
Go ahead, Ron.
and most of the staff, you said either bikes or Beta, based on the staff
That
that
is
you have
correct. We
employed.
even, we,
Visa status.
Visa status, and that's not exclusive to Visa status. We have new members that have joined our team at our other property that are using the Beta service as well, just because they haven't facilitated a car.
And you mentioned you had staff housing. Right?
I have staff housing, 2 different houses.
That's not uncommon now throughout the region, just.
Right.
Shorts,
Yes.
bought a hotel, staff housing, walking distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say, can I say one more thing? I will say that I really think you need to talk to the owners of the Tamarack Lodge. They're not happy. They're feeling railroaded, and, we had a lot of reading material, and a lot of it said they're not talking to us, essentially. And I think that you need to start talking to them, because I think this can be worked out. And I think that the Township Planning Commission is not the ones to take the brunt of this.
I apologize that you took the brunt of it. That wasn't the intent here in any way. And our informative newsletter went out late, and that's on me. And it was planned on going out the whole time. However, the notice issue jumped in front of when we had it scheduled to go out, and then that facilitated you guys getting pounded with stuff. And we did our very best effort after we received a couple of those to redo our notice letter to the ownership group and address a lot of their concerns. So, and since then, we've had maybe not as many as you have in your hands, but we've had a fair number of people that have contacted us approving of the project. So,
We don't have any of those letters.
I know you have at least one. I know you have at least one because
That
we
don't
sent it
say
on to
we're
you.
fools?
No. We said, we sent out one.
There were close to 200 letters.
Well, and again, I understand, and I would also like to point out that we do have a vested interest still in the Tamarack. We have over 190 different ownership shares inside of the Tamarack that the family owns. So we are not, a small entity here. We're not here as just the management company. We are a vested ownership interest in the whole project. It's not small.
But to make it that place that all these people loved for so many years, I just expressed that I would like you to communicate with them.
We'll do our best effort.
Thank you, Josh.
I'll make a motion to approve SPR 6-24 based on the findings of facts and special conditions 1 through 9.
Support.
Are all those...
Discussion of the motion.
I just want to say the special conditions 1 through 9, Claire, the 3 that you mentioned, are those
Yeah, they're in
in?
there. They're in there.
The only one that's not in there is just that the staff would be the first to park off-site.
Do we need to add that?
Says
I'll
number
add-
10.
Add condition number 10, staff parks offsite.
Primary.
Or-
That's the amended motion.
Yep.
Renee, are you okay with the amended motion?
Yes. I will support
Okay.
the amended motion.
Okay. All's in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your time and explanation. Thank you for all those who showed up. We appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
Okay, we're going to switch gears entirely to childcare. Give everybody a second. I'm just scrolling through the PDF, trying to get through the correspondence portion.
What page are we going to?
I'm getting there.
I know, right?
We are on page 170 of the packet. It's the zoning amendment for childcare.
The last two pages.
I was just gonna say.
Don't you have a place
Oh.
to link?
It's
And
literally
I don't know
the
why it
last
didn't,
page.
when I saved it this time, it didn't do that. Because I rely on those. Okay, we're there. We're live. I think we're good.
So this is, should be a fairly short one. Recall that in September of 2023, the township adopted a zoning amendment intended to
You
help.
can't close it.
Intended to help remove barriers to opening and operating daycares throughout the township. At that time, the Planning Commission decided to hold off on closely examining the standards because the Planning Commission was looking at holistically looking at the standards during the zoning ordinance rewrite. At the zoning ordinance work session in April, a couple of weeks ago, the Planning Commission discussed fencing requirements in the current zoning ordinance that are more burdensome than the state licensing requirements, and directed staff to draft language to defer to state requirements as applicable for childcare fencing. So I went ahead and drafted a ordinance amendment to basically update the standards associated with childcare homes, group facilities, and daycare center or childcare center. So I will note that we, as a part of the zoning ordinance rewrite, we're updating the terms and definitions to make them consistent with state licensing definitions and terms. However, this is more of a Band-Aid amendment to allow at least one, possibly more childcare operations to move forward before the ordinance goes into effect.
Yep.
Based on master plan priority for childcare.
So this is to a 4-foot fence, right?
It is, we have no requirements
No
for fencing.
Okay.
What was spoke
Because the
at
state is
the last
for-
meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it defaults to the state. My apologies
exactly.
for not clarifying.
We're not approving anything more than suggesting setting a public hearing in theory, right?
Yep, this would be to set a public hearing for your June meeting.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for text amendment ZA 2-24 child care standards as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Mindy, seconded by Rhonda to approve and set a public hearing for June, at our regular June meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Public comment.
Susan Lighthouser with Housing North. Thank you for your service. That is my public comment.
Aw. That was nice.
Good to see you, Susan. I only have one thing, not that this is anything to do with consideration of future agenda items, but I just wanted to share this too, because we're moving on this right now with childcare standards. We were talking literally today about this, and Networks Northwest is putting together kind of an informational report covering the 10-county area. And it's basically showing places across all municipalities that are, have demand through employment and also young population, to show where demand is and show possible facilities that could actually facilitate via zoning, via size, via state requirements, where they could actually go. And then another thing that they're going to look at is the zoning more restrictive than the states to even allow it? And what they're finding is that, I can't remember if it was 60 or 80%, I want to say it was like 80% of the municipalities was more restrictive than the state's requirements and was not allowing these to move forward because of that. So they're kind of coming at it from full charge in terms of trying to figure out a way to present to places that are getting hit, or maybe aren't getting hit with the same things that we've been getting hit with, to try and help just educate and put some recommendations out there, which I just thought was really cool and something to share. As far as upcoming meeting dates, May 21st is going to be a hotbed for zoning updates. Know that. We'll all be here with smiling faces, and
Except for me.
except for Paul, you already told me about that. And, yeah, thank you for this. This is helpful. Put that on the radar, put it on the refrigerator. Next meeting is June 4th. Beyond that, I think we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.